Do they think we got 3 Rod Brindamores or what?
I think I started lifting real light weights when I was like 12.
You are now listening to the Rod the Podcast with your hosts, Jordan Betts and Mike Menn.
All right, Michael, it's good to be back behind the mics. We kind of tonight want to recap what's happened in the first month in earnest of the NHL offseason since free agency opened on July the 1st. Before we dive in, how we doing?
Doing pretty good. You know, we just got to see if we still know how to do this. It's just our month and change challenge at this point.
You know, trying to get in the rhythm. It's one of those things, aligning schedules, but also it just felt like we were on the precipice of something big happening and we didn't want it to be dated immediately. Schedules happen, like I said, and here we are a month later. But apologies for that. Going to be a jam-packed episode, a lot to get to. Let's start out with some good news. Sebastian Aho signs the largest extension in Carolina Hurricanes history. How are we feeling about that?
I mean, it's awesome news. We've talked about it for a while. It's super important to get that done. Number one, if he didn't want to come back, you needed to move him. If there was going to be an impasse or if he didn't have interest, you can't have the John Tavares, Johnny Gaudreau, you name the scenario. You can't have your superstar player, if we want to call him that.
I think
you can't. I think for the Canes, he probably qualifies as that. You can't have them walk for free. That sets your franchise back pretty drastically. So having him sign was big for that. And then simultaneously, you're looking at having him potentially retire as a Hurricane now. The likelihood has definitely gone up significantly, and it basically makes him the shoo-in to be the next captain of the Carolina Hurricanes, and all of those are really, really positive things that you have to be super happy about.
Yeah, and so the contract details an additional 8 years at $9.78 million total. Obviously a very deserved contract, worthy of the number. I think we can debate the merits of superstar. I think without question he's a Hurricane superstar. Has been and probably will continue to be for the next little bit at least the best player on the team. You know, a guy that you mentioned is already in a leadership role, but will likely be the next captain once Jordan Staal decides to retire. To me, the biggest thing here is, of course, getting it to the deadline, but man, way to do it without the hysterics and the drama of the previous iteration of how this contract drama went. And hey, it's a good deal. You've seen, you know, both Twitter, everyone's favorite app, and we'll talk about it later. I guess now it's X, my mistake. But a lot on there of, hey, this is a terrific value deal for the Canes. They're signing a top 10 center in the league. Fantastic. You're also seeing, hey, they overpay, but that's how it's going to be. But I generally more positive than negative. I wanted it to be below 10 AAV. It was that. I think it's a great deal for both sides, and I look forward to him continuing to be the guy here for the Canes.
Yeah, I mean, he is a bona fide number one center locked up at less than $10 million for the next 9 seasons. I mean, with the expectation that the cap is going up, it makes the deal even better.
100%.
It's a good deal today, and that's before the cap goes up at all.
And what you really have to consider, it's only a little bit more than $1 million annually difference. It's not a crazy thing for the team.
Absolutely. And when we talked about the offer sheet when it originally happened, I think that the math was kind of like he needed to be making more than 10 on this next deal for it to really have made sense for him to sign that offer sheet. And the reality of it is, I don't know if there was a change of heart in that 5 years where he decided he didn't want to test the market at all, but this really wasn't the time to be going into your next negotiation. I'm thinking a year or two down the road.
This could have been a lot
better.
different. And, you know, maybe he went through that and just decided, I want to nip in the bud and signed the right deal for me and the team, and he's obviously going to be highly compensated for his efforts here, and he deserves to be. So all positives in that regard. Any kind of final thoughts? Do you want to debate the superstar thing, or are we good to go there?
Yeah, I mean, we can debate the superstar thing, and then also I think we have to look at the fact that I think Waddell maybe learned his lesson by playing that black ball or whatever you want to.
Or maybe Waddell realized that he had more leverage because Aho was an RFA, and this time he would have been a UFA. To me, to kind of preface the superstar debate, it looks to me like it's two things. You got people, the positives in two camps. One, analytics Twitter has him as a top 5 center, bona fide, no doubt. I think the bigger question, and maybe what we want to dive into, is he a Stanley Cup winning first line center?
Hopefully. I mean,
can he elevate to that level?
Sure.
Or is it more so the pieces around him? Because, I mean, did Vegas have a bona fide? I mean, Eichel's,
No.
I would say at his best, Eichel's probably better than Aho, but Aho's been better the past number of years. I mean, it's debatable.
I think
He's in that vicinity, in that echelon.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think there is nothing that stops him from being a Stanley Cup winning center. I don't think that's even close to a thing in my book. Because
So if they win it, it's not because can't elevate to that level. Because I think he already performs at that level.
yeah, I think
Okay.
I would say that he's already there. Obviously, as a competitor, he's going to say there are things he can improve on, and there definitely are things he can improve on. But you can't ask for much more. He's good in the face-off circle. He is a goal scorer. He forechecks. He backchecks. He does all the little things on the ice. He's a leader. And, I mean, you're never not going to get it from him. He brings it all the time. Like, could he have a little more pure goal scorer in him? Like, he works for a lot of his goals 100%.
He does.
Could he have some of those back-breaking goals where you score against the run of play maybe? Yeah, he could maybe be a little bit better at that, but that's probably not his role.
We're nitpicking at that point.
Absolutely.
Right?
And that's
we can also discuss, as we have in previous pods, how much of the system is a part of this.
100%.
One thing that he does unquestionably is embrace the system, plays his role, and excels within that. If we took the governor off and he was able just to he would
for offense,
right?
Yeah.
Maybe he would put up more numbers and all those things. But would the team be as successful? And you have a guy who's a part of your leadership core that recognizes that doing his job's more important than individual stats. And that's what I think. It's the little things. A guy who plays in every situation without question. And gosh, I mean, they haven't won a cup. Produces
in every situation.
I mean, we talk about not being a goal scorer, but
penalty kill, power play,
multiple 30-goal seasons,
Yeah.
he's 37, 38. Like, the guy puts up numbers down a little bit this past year, but he missed some time with injury. Couldn't be more pleased with the number and the contract. I think it's a win-win for both sides, and I look forward to him being that first-line center that leads them to their second cup.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think a really big piece of that puzzle that you mentioned was the system, and the system certainly doesn't highlight I don't want to say this the wrong way, but at the end of the day, it's not built to have guys come in and cheat for offense and be those game-breaking scorers that are flying the defensive zone early to try and get
They're
two-on-ones
not
and stuff.
trying to
So,
win 5-4. They're driven offensively a lot on the back end, systematically, not for the lack of talent up top.
forecheck and cycle.
Exactly. So, like I said, to kind of put a bow on it, great deal for both sides. Exceedingly happy for him. He deserves it. Speaking of some other signings, do you want to dive in on bringing the guys back or the guys that were brought in for free agency or from free agency?
I think we just go down the list
Okay.
and with no.
So
preference.
the one that I really want to dive into, Dmitry Orlov signs a 2-year, $7.5 AAV deal with the Carolina Hurricanes. I think this is kind of, well, he was unquestionably the number one defenseman available in free agency. And so anytime you do that, great. and it was a signing that was largely praised across the board. The AAV, as everyone acknowledges, is too high, but the fact that they're able to give him on a short 2-year deal, which aligns with when many of the other contracts come up, so they're not committed long term, leveraging cap space the way they did with the Kokiniemi signing a guy for more than market value, but not committing yourself long term. I think it's another outstanding move by Don and his staff.
Yeah, I mean, the organization has made a point that they are willing to commit dollars and less term. They've said it. I think if Dougie was interested in something like that, you could have seen Dougie sign a 3 or 4 year deal when he hit free agency at a much, much higher number.
Way more, like more than 9 that he signed for.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, they're not willing to commit 8-year contracts to aging players with a big AAV hit. And I think it's probably smart because if you look at the analytics, the gameplay typically falls off. And when you remove players like Brent Burns and stuff that are the outliers, it's probably even a steeper drop off at that point. So it's smart business by the Canes. Like you mentioned, 7.75 AAV is certainly high, but it's only 2 years and it walks you straight up to the point where Nikishin can come over from Russia and step potentially right into that role. So it's good business by the Hurricanes.
Okay, the side of this that makes it at least makes you put your eyebrows up and is this really the right thing? Is now you have a bit of a logjam on the back end, and we can loop in TDA a little bit later. But let's just focus on the lineup, how it's currently constructed. And so I don't expect to see Slavin and Burns split. So where does that leave us in the second and third pairings? You're looking at Shea, Orlov, Pesci, Chatfield, and TDA all available. I know we want to talk about what's next in a little bit, but does this signing for you is it a little perplexing from that standpoint? Was this offer not available to Shea or Pesci, or do you think they just would not have pursued that with these guys? Because in Orlov, you're getting a little bit more of a defense-first guy, a guy that's had some success in this league, but not a guy that would traditionally merit that number.
Yeah, I mean, I think Orlov is probably an upgrade on Shea and Pesci, to be completely frank with you. I think
they're going to be coming after you on
sure
X app or whatever it's called.
They're
now.
Welcome to
Pesh supporters.
No, and I love
great player.
I love Pesci.
I don't think that was a slight.
No, I love Pesci, and I hope to see him in Carolina continuously. But Orlov is top pairing potential. Like Orlov could certainly play top pairing. I think Shea and Pesci are really, really, really solid, high end second pairing defensemen. As it stands right now, I mean, you definitely are running out Slavin, Burns, probably Orlov, Pesci, Shea, Chatfield. I don't really know what the plan for TDA is. Do you play 11 forwards and 7 defensemen?
I don't know.
I don't. I'm really not sure.
Well, because the way they're currently constructed, that with how money is allocated and what's been proven within the AHL, the 11-7 makes more sense with the current personnel. I tend to believe we're waiting for another shoe to drop, and that will likely come in the form of a Pesci and or Shea trade, but we'll see how that goes. I don't know. Is Orlov that much of an upgrade? You believe he is?
I think he is, and I think you also have to take into account the really big piece of this puzzle that I alluded to was Nikishin is already viewed probably as a top forward defenseman in the NHL. The Canes have made it abundantly clear that he is very much a big part of their future plans. They're not going to put themselves in a position where either A, they have to give away one of these assets for free down the road just to keep Nikishin when it comes to re-signing. So you have to think about that when you look at a Shea or Pesci extension, is what are the ramifications going to be on a future Nikishin extension. That's a really big piece. So term is obviously super important there. And at the end of the day, I mean, I would like to keep one of Shea or Pesci in the long run, and I would obviously prefer Pesci. I'm not sure what those dollar signs look like because, I mean, if you're running Pesci and Nikishin, I think that's a really outstanding second pair. You've got the veteran that's going to play smart and at home and stable, and then you can just unleash Nikishin to go brutalize people, essentially. I mean,
that's the hope, right?
He's going to be super physical. We'll see if the offense can translate into the NHL. He's got a big slap shot. He's mobile. He can outlet pass. He's a high-end defenseman. So when I look at, I don't know if I've clearly answered the question, but when I look at Pesce, Shea, and Orlov, I think the Canes are really committed to Nikishin in the future and making sure that he has a role available to him that will draw him over to North America when his time is up in Russia. And honestly, I kind of think that's where they're putting their eggs in right now. Is that basket.
Honestly, I like that you extrapolated the question and made it more of a 4-person discussion as opposed to a 3. I think when you look at the lexicon of where they're at as an organization and as they build this defensive core or keep it together, that is kind of the next level thought process that needs to be within this discussion. You know, the discourse around Orlov, Shea, Pesce really can't be had in full without Nikishin. So that's a really great observation. Focusing on the here and now, does it not feel like that the move has to almost be Pesce, though? Because traditionally, they don't like playing defensemen on their offside. Orlov can, but it feels right now you have 4 NHL quality defensemen that are right-handed or right shot, and then vice versa, 3 on the left side. It just feels like we're stacking up that Pesce's going to be the odd man out, which is tough for a lot of people to swallow, and understandably.
Yeah, it is tough for people to swallow. At the end of the day, it all comes back to me in the fact that I have a hard time unless you're seeing Shea as your own like trade deadline acquisition that you're just going to play on the third pairing, even though he's suited
it's a
for
lot to pay. Yeah.
I mean, you have a 1A in Jacob Slavin. You probably have a 1B in Orlov, and then you probably have a 2A in Shea, and you're going to have to filter them all out between 3 pairings most likely, unless you're willing to go to the offside. And to kind of advance this conversation a little bit when we're talking about the 4 right-handed players, if Pesce moves on and you're not bringing back a right-handed defenseman and moving out, like you almost have to move Chatfield too, unless the organization is so confident that he is ready for top 4 minutes. And I'm not going to say he's not, because I think he was fantastic as a third pair defenseman last year. I think he has all the tools to take another step, but that's a huge commitment to make from a team that has Stanley Cup aspirations. And is that a move that Waddell and Brendamore, because Brendamore is very active in these things, is that a move that they're comfortable with making?
It does not feel like the right time for that with how everything's constructed. And maybe using this prism, maybe it makes more sense that Shea is the guy on the way out, because we have seen Chatfield play on his offside. And so that would leave you with Slavin, Orlov, Chatfield on the left, with Burns, Pesce, TDA on the right. And then it feels like everyone's slotted in the correct roles.
100%.
So maybe that's the decision they're trying to look through. And it's, it could come down to Shea or Pesce making the decision for them in a sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's definitely a piece of the puzzle. I think they will willingly keep one of the two. I mean, I think they would keep potentially both of them, depending on it. For Shea, I think it really matters
to the year with it, but I think they want to make.
They don't like to make those moves in the year,
right? It feels like something. Like I said, preface the whole conversation. Another shoe is about to drop, and I think they're working through what exactly that is. But of the 2 scenarios presented, analogous of any trade discussion, what we would have to look at, to me, it makes a lot more sense to have Chatfield on the left side. That's the lineup that makes more sense. Just because you're, from an allocation of resources standpoint, it makes more sense and alignment. And also, we've seen Chatfield do it. Keeps Pesci in his correct role. Him and Orloff would be a dynamite pairing. I just think that allows you to lock TDA on the second power play unit. It just makes a lot more sense to me.
Yeah, I agree. And like Tony you can't have brought him in to be your second pairing.
Let's have the Tony discussion. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, 1 by 1.675, as opposed to making the trade and giving up a prospect. Philadelphia buys him out. I think we would have got him for 2.5 after all their
Carolina
retention.
saves between 8 and 9.
Yeah, Carolina
100K.
saves a contract. We'll call it a contract in value. They don't give up a prospect, but you don't sign a guy 1 year 1.675 to step into your second pairing. I would be really shocked if that's what their plan was.
And I don't think he can play that role without Slavin. And
no, I
Slavin's
agree.
going to be playing with Burns.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think Shea and TDA would be a little terrifying. Well, I mean, I guess he would play with Orlov.
He'd play with Orlov, but
even then,
there's only one person that I want to see TDA playing top 4 minutes with, and it's Jacob Slavin. And I don't want to see TDA playing with Jacob Slavin because I want Brent Burns to be playing with Jacob Slavin.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and Orlov likes to roam and stuff too. And I don't.
That's not the compliment.
Yeah, you don't need those two.
Well, let's have the
paired up.
Tony discussion, and let's try to avoid some of the Twitter hysterics because the X. Gosh, I know. I can't even call it the Bird app. What you see on there is what you'd anticipate. It's all the things we talked about when Carolina signed him during the first iteration. The more hockey-centric, nuanced take that is independent of politics and or other factors, from what we know, and remember, this whole podcast and everyone that it's involved with Canes that's not internal, we don't really know these guys. And so we can only interpret what we read and what we see. And from everything we see, independent of what we think of him as a person or some decisions he's made, his teammates like him. The coaching staff loves him. He is what he is as a player. He's an offensive force that is an extreme liability at times defensively. To me, when it comes to him, that's how I want to frame the conversation. I don't care about all the tertiary stuff. He was not a bad person or malignant in the community. Great. He actually brought a little edge and grit and things that this team kind of needs. It alludes to why they signed like a Brendan Lemieux, right?
Yeah.
The Michael Buntings, guys like that bring a little bit of sandpaper. It's not a bad thing to have. And you were talking about this before we got on. If he was that bad of a guy, why is he getting invited to all these guys' weddings? Why are they so welcome to have him back? And again, this doesn't condone his decisions in the past or things he's said or things he's done. But let's live in the here and now and not so much. Let's speak on what we've seen of him here, which has been largely positive.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think we've gotten a little out of hand with the inability to move on sometimes. I think that's just part of society at this point, is we like to get hung up on certain things, and we're not going to really go into that. We've gone into it on when we originally signed him.
Our initial thing was we want to give him the benefit of doubt to prove that he can be a positive force on the team and in the community. Nothing within the first stint here would signify he can't. I expect nothing less here, and we will judge him accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, he's on a short leash, and he earned his short leash, and he's lost millions of dollars as a result of his actions. Like, there's no denying that. He was on pace to get paid a lot more money in his career, and it is what it is. And at the end of the day, he wasn't meant to be a number one defensive defenseman. Like, he has the offensive ability to really help in a lineup. If you can put him down your lineup and protect him and keep him away from some of the more dangerous matchups and give him a good partner that's steady and allow him to produce what he can at 5-on-5 and hopefully be a change maker on the second power play, I think it's all great. Look, when the playoffs came around, when he was here, power play wasn't great. Okay.
As is tradition.
As is tradition. And the reality is, well, hopefully by, having him and Burns, you can get one unit hot.
Yeah, you have less of a power play 1, power play 2, and then 1A, 1B. That's kind of how I would view it. And the real factor here for me is the familiarity. Steps right in, knows the staff, knows the system. To the cost. I mean, the opportunity cost here is exceptional. I mean, this is a guy that's going to produce above and beyond the 1.6 plus that you're paying him.
Yeah.
You got a deal. You didn't have to make the trade. All things that you said. The question I have for you, Mike, and I'm not going to give my opinion yet. Talking with the scenario that we previously created with how the lineup will play out defensively, can Jalen Chatfield be the partner to kind of protect Tony, to allow Tony to do what he does best, but Band-Aid over the defensive lapses? And secondarily, do you believe you win and lose a Stanley Cup because of a third pairing defenseman playing 11 minutes a night?
So, yeah, those are good questions. And to answer the first question, Jalen Chatfield, I think he has the ability to kind of be that Band-Aid. I think it'll kind of alter his role. He's going to have to stay at home a little bit more maybe than he did last year, I should say. He's got all the tools, like I mentioned earlier. I mean, we're hypothetically talking about he has an outside shot at being top 4 quality right now. I think there are teams he could go and be a number 4 defenseman for sure.
I don't think that's crazy at all.
No, and
the fact that we're talking about it with this team, debatably the best defensive unit in the entire league.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not a name, so people don't put him that way.
Sure.
But he's in the discussion. If they went into the year and he was one of their top 4, this is not a calamity.
No, I agree. And I mean, he's a late bloomer, so like you mentioned, he doesn't get the notoriety. But at the end of the day, good skater, good on defense. I mean, he's got to learn. He's got to be a little bit smarter situationally and all these things. But you have to be encouraged by the steps he's taken and the willingness he has to do the hard things and prove himself. And you have to have some belief in a guy like that that's willing to constantly do the work every day when he probably should have been in the NHL a year or two earlier. I mean,
Wrong system, right? I mean,
he probably deserved a shot with the Canes earlier than he even got one, and he probably could have developed better if he hadn't. I don't know, where was he before that? Vancouver, maybe? I don't even remember.
I misspoke. Right system. It's just hard to move. Wrong organization as far as movement. You know,
Yeah.
They often say, to use baseball in my background, it's a lot harder to come up with the Yankees, Red Sox, Dodgers than it is Miami or Pittsburgh or someone else.
Sure.
Like, because those teams invest, they're strong in the areas that you would expect them to be strong defensively. Carolina Hurricanes about as strong as anyone in the league the past handful of years. So the fact that he was a late bloomer and bought his time and did get an opportunity, outstanding on him. And he keeps developing and improving. So the one thing that you mentioned that I think really needs to be highlighted, the skating. I mean, whoever plays with Tony has to be able to move. Tony's a good skater himself. It should be a pairing that pressures people, especially in this system. But Chatfield has the skating ability and to make up for some mistakes. Now, like you said, he has his positional things occasionally, and maybe that's not ideal with those two together. But I thought he looked really good on his offside, and I like the skating and the sandpaper, that those two guys can bring together. They'll be a tough pairing to play against in a different way, as opposed to just not being able to do anything versus Jacob Slavin.
Well, and if you turn the puck over, they can both get the puck up the ice quick.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have the skating for both of them, honestly, but Tony can hit the outlet passes. I think Jalen's gotten better at it, and I mean, Jalen's got wheels, so he can go. I mean, that's you have to be aware when you have. It's
a pretty nice counter punching, yeah.
You're gonna be running out a lot of fast players when you've got a Svetch, Aho, Jarvis with potentially those two out on the ice. It's a lot of speed and a lot of skill, and
just allows the team to play in another facet of how they can deviate their style a little bit more. The second question.
Yep.
Twitter's telling me that signing Tony means you can't win a Stanley Cup because even if you shelter him, you can't do it. Do you think a third pairing defenseman is the reason you do or do not win a cup?
No, I would say definitely not. I think at the end of the day, you need every player on the ice, right? And it can come down to one play, but that play could be Jacob Slavin missing a clear. It could be any player. At the end of the day, you have to try to put out a roster with as much talent as possible without going over the limit, unless you're going to utilize LTR like several Stanley Cup champions in the past have.
Not naming any names.
Yeah, not going to name names, but at the end of the day, you're not going to find better bang for your buck than a Jalen Chatfield, than honestly, I think Tony's deal is good. It's tough to look at, and you got Nason and all. You have lots of really good budget contracts. You got Jarvis still playing on a rookie contract. You got Natchez at $3 million. They've got all these really good budget skill players mixed in with. I mean, I don't think there's a bad contract on the list anywhere. So I mean, I don't know how you can do much better than that.
What's the worst contract on there?
God.
Right now, maybe Turbo looks not great, but it's 1 year.
Yeah, and I'll
Orlov
say
at 7's not palatable, but it makes sense.
And even that isn't. I wouldn't even say a bad contract. And the Turbo one, like, it
was a good contract at the time, and it has been good value until this past season.
I think it will be good value. And management and Rod will know better than we know, but at the end of the day, it comes down to where's Turbo's head at. He's, rough season with injuries. And we know when he had his contract negotiations going on, his play dipped. He's obviously a player that needs to be in a good mental space to really perform at a high level. And it's Rod and management's job to find out, hey, this is what we expect from you. This is the role we want you to play. Are you going to be happy with that? And if the answer is no, they have to seriously think about what value they're going to get out of Turbo. I still think Turbo is a fantastic player. I think he's capable of playing everywhere. I think he had a rough season. I would like to see him stay, but at the end of the day, if management thinks that they can get a big boost, and when you're trading him, you have to consider what he can be, and you have to go out and get an asset that's probably better than what Turbo can be for a similar AAV, and you're going to have a hard time finding that. So
my guess is there's been some posturing and rumors that he may be involved in trade discussions, and I'm sure he is. He's a fairly valuable piece and a guy that's been a part of this core for a while. My guess is he's back, and that Carolina will likely extend him because of this lesser season to a fairly team-friendly deal, and Carolina keeps just doing it over and over again. Team-friendly deal, capital. That's what they did with Natchez.
It'll really depend on how his season starts, right? I think that's going to be a really big piece of it. If he has a bad season and then halfway through the year he's had another bad season, you just got to seriously consider number one, what is he willing to take at that point? If you're having back-to-back bad seasons, that's really bad for your next contract, regardless of
and
where
maybe he
at.
realizes he's not in the top 6 here anymore, and the utilization then isn't what he needs to flourish, and he's not that type of player that's going to play down in the lineup and succeed. Okay, then maybe it's a happy divorce on both sides, and you move forward, and they get an asset, and train moves on.
Yeah, no, that could certainly be something that happens. I mean, if you're looking to make a big splash, which the Canes constantly do, that's a piece that could be on the way out.
For sure. Well, let's skip a little bit. We're going to come back to some of the free agent and re-signings but you just teed it up so well. Sure. What's your guess? I keep alluding to there feels like there's something else that's on the precipice. Something's coming. This is not how they will enter into training camp or even the season in early October. Do you have anything in your gut right now? Is there a turbo deal? Are we moving one of the defensemen? And if so, what are they moving them for? And you don't have to give specific players, but like kind of an archetype.
I mean, I could. At the end of the day, if you've got Turbo on the market, you've got Pesci on the market, I think that we're at a point now where we're talking picks and prospects as well. There's going to be a lot of guys that can crack NHL lineups that are going to probably have a really tough time cracking the Canes lineup, and you can't just let them sit in the AHL forever. So at a certain point, you're going to have to start turning those assets into something else, and I could see them packaging together a lot of pieces, potentially going for a 2-center as a short-term play for Kotkaniemi to be your 3C and Stahl to be your 4C. I don't see a world where KK is playing 4C. I think he really grew last season. He's still young, and I think the potential for him is still higher than where he's at. So I think there's room in that ceiling for him to grow. And I think it would be a major disservice for him not to see 15, 16 minutes a night at a minimum. So I'm thinking you probably have to play KK worst case scenario as your third center. So maybe they go out and look for a second center in the interim that helps them maybe get over the hump the next couple of years. Could always see them going for a scoring winger. I mean, we obviously have been trying to acquire one for some time now, whether it's through free agency or trade. So I could see that being something they look for. And maybe it is they look for that next top 4 right-handed defenseman. I know we've got Scott Morrow in the pipeline. How quickly do they think he can be on the Canes roster? How quickly do they think he'll be a top 4 player? Do they think he'll be a Canes player? What's the deal with that? So they could be looking to acquire a second pairing right-handed defenseman, scoring winger, a 2-center. Those are the main places I could really see them going.
For sure. And I don't even have much to add. I think you absolutely nailed it. Let's kind of pivot over into, it was an exciting, let's call it 24, 48 hours here in Canes land. It looked like Vladimir Tarasenko was going to be a Carolina Hurricane. I'm not sure at this stage in his career if he is that high-end goal scorer, but he has been in this league. And then at the same time, it felt like Carolina was getting really close on a potential William Karlsson deal, the reigning Norris Trophy winner. That's all kind of quieted down now. You kind of have not William Karlsson.
Eric, yeah.
not the Vegas center. But it kind of felt like we had gotten to the point where the balls were really in play. And now it's been a quiet, two-ish weeks. There was a report that Carolina and Pittsburgh were the kind of finalists for Karlsson. Now it doesn't feel like that's the case. It's the door is back open. And obviously Tarasenko is now signed in Ottawa. Kind of tell me your emotions. What were you feeling through this time? And I know a lot of people are really excited because it seemed like Carolina stepping out into the forefront. One, they had spent money in free agency already. It felt out of character, but still highly prudent. They're always in on every deal, but even these discussions felt so much more public than the traditional Carolina Hurricanes trade dialogue. How are you feeling? Because I know it was a lot for me to take in.
Yeah, so we'll talk Tarasenko first, and it sounds like they were just waiting on the paperwork to be signed. Obviously, there was a major disconnect between Tarasenko and his agent. From what's been circling on the internet, it sounds like the Canes had put in an offer of 1 year at less than $4 million. He ended up getting 5. So
I wonder
obviously,
how that works after tax, though.
Yeah, I don't know. And the reality is at the end of the day, I'm gonna speak to this from probably a different perspective than I think maybe some have looked at it from. And I think at the end of the day, what his agent was doing was saying, hey, we're going to plug you into the Canes. The Canes do a good job at turning assets.
Rehabilitating careers. That's exactly what I was looking for. And he's going to play there 1 year. The cap's going to go up. And then we're going to sign that last long-term deal. And I think from his agent's perspective, that was probably a good idea, because on the flip side, we look at a player like DeBrincat who went to Ottawa. And when DeBrincat first went to Ottawa, all the talk was in the 9. Is he even worth $10 million at some points was the chatter. And after a season in Ottawa, he gets traded and signs for significantly less. So at the end of the day, there's more to it than meets the eye, I think. And I think what the agent was thinking was competitive team, rehabilitate career, be healthy for a year, score a bunch of goals on the Canes power play, go sign a big contract somewhere else the following year. Now the question is that going to happen in Ottawa? And I don't know. I liked his chances better to do that here. But that's,
Absolutely.
Mike, that's a really insightful perspective that, as you said, I haven't heard anyone voice that purview. So, yeah, it makes a ton of sense. And maybe he changed agents. So the previous agent was playing chess, and the current one was playing checkers. I mean, a little bit more rudimentary with the get the most money now, need to sign for X. That is what my client is worth, as opposed to reestablishing value closer to the player that we've known in this league. So really, really nice point there.
Yeah, and I mean, it sounded like the agent had turned down some more term and money as well. Then I think Ottawa's initial offer was for more money and more term, and now they've circled back, and he ends up in. So I mean, at the end of the day,
I understand not doing term just because of the cap going up, but yeah. And how did this whole saga playing out? Were you like high as high, like so pumped, or are you kind of lesser than the consensus feel on bringing him in, and then when it didn't ultimately come to fruition, were you okay with that?
Yeah, so I never got all the way up. I thought, wow, there's like a really good chance this is gonna happen, but I've learned over the years you got to really wait until these things get locked in. So I never got to a point where I thought he was 100% a Kane. It just sounded like there was a really good chance. And I thought, yeah, I could see that being a good fit if they're going to get him for 1 year and good term. Like, hey, that's plug him into the power play, stick him on the third line, and let's rock. Like, I'm good with that. I mean, and if he has a good season, you can bump him up the lineup, and then you have more flexibility. So I liked it. I thought it was great. But at the same time, when you saw those early insider tweets, I think Shayna Goldman might have been the first one to tweet about it. There wasn't a lot of discourse to follow from some of the bigger insiders. And I will say this, number one, insiders have been all over the place this offseason. So it hasn't been a great year for rumors. Rumors have been flying everywhere that have been just completely wrong. I mean, that's every offseason.
Feels a lot more speculative.
That's and to be fair to Shayna, because I'm pretty sure it was Shayna that was the first one to report it. It sounds like the Canes thought it was done.
Right.
So
no, she was on it. It's not her. And
yeah, I wouldn't
know
say that's a Shayna problem.
No, not at all. And we know the big voices in hockey media always struggle here. But yeah, this whole thing, it just, to me, I was similar to you. It didn't pass the sniff test from the onset. Like,
Sure.
Something seems a little off here. This is not getting the traction, and it's not getting done. And once it lingers for a little bit after being kind of leaked or reported,
Yeah.
if those deals don't come home, oftentimes they don't.
Yeah, I mean, when Kane stuff gets leaked, it's done almost all the time. The only time I can think of it was last year with Marchment, when it was basically the same scenario. So it's just not something that happens. And I think the Canes thought they had Marchment, and the Canes thought they had Tarasenko. So when these things leak out, and like you mentioned, when they start to kind of like quietly drag on, and you don't see everyone being like, this is right, this is right, this is right, that's when you know something's up. So when 12 hours had passed. I was like, yeah, this is every hour that passes now is less likely for this deal to get done, unless they're like he's traveling and
D'Angelo.
Yeah.
Like we felt like
Sure.
that was going to end up happening in some capacity, and it did. And it wasn't the original capacity. But yeah, I think we're on the same page. Would have loved to have had him, but it's not, once again, a deal breaker in any way. I still think they're on the lookout for some more scoring punch. And as we mentioned earlier, that might come via trade. The other big rumor, and maybe we shouldn't talk this one in the past tense because it looks like Erik Karlsson will still be traded. What are your thoughts there? Is this a good ad? Is it necessary? Is it redundant? I don't know. Is it going to be worth the cost for you? Because it's not cheap.
No, I mean it's not cheap. It's hard to turn down like somebody that produces is that level. That's a bona fide superstar offensive defenseman. They don't just, you can't just find those anywhere. So when you have an opportunity,
debatably the biggest name to ever play for the franchise.
Yeah, when you have an opportunity to go acquire a player like that, you have to take it super seriously. I think at the end of the day, what you're looking at right now is, if you don't like the D'Angelo signing, I got news for you. Guess who else is horrible at defense? Erik Karlsson.
He was better last year.
He was. I think he was
For him.
in the bottom of the barrel on the defensive side of analytics. But at the end of the day, when you are hemming teams into the offensive zone and producing at the clip he does, you're net positive. I think so. If the Canes are able to bring in a player like that, great. You're going to look different than you have as an organization in the past. But, I mean, it would be hard to argue with that star power. The cap is going to be a big part of it. How much
it would have? I mean, we're expecting it to, but it would really have to go.
It would have to be a multiple team trade, I think, because I think you'd probably want to pass off cap to another team as well. I would think the Canes want to get it down to at least half of its current value.
And San Jose is not willing to go below a certain point.
They said they didn't say no definitively, but they put a hard stance on that they didn't want to. So essentially, the price would be really high. I think you could get a Karlsson for an asset mix of a Turbo, a Pesci, a prospect and a pick, maybe something along those lines.
The agreement those guys are going to re-sign type deal.
Or knowing that they're ultimately just going to go and flip Turbo and Pesci again. It depends on how San Jose feels
and
about
the amount of money retained.
You'd almost want to, I mean, if they're they've already retained on Burns. If they retain on Karlsson, I mean, you're really pushing your window of competitiveness out anyways. So you're probably flipping Turbo and Pesci, and the question at that point is, do you even want them?
Yeah, exactly.
To flip them or not?
Prospects and Carolina's not going to do Nikishin, so
I don't know.
I don't
know.
Morrow, is this where Morrow goes?
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough to tell.
I can't conceive a good package that would entice them to do it and also retain the requisite amount of salary to get a deal done. But then again, I'm not sure who else in the league can put together that package either.
And have the cap space.
Exactly.
I mean,
that's the problem at this point.
If you get them to about half and you move Pesci and Turbo out, you're sitting with a heap of cap space left over. I mean, hypothetically, they could take on a lot more of the cap in that scenario. I don't think that's what they want to do. I think he's got 4 years left, if I'm not mistaken.
Longer than you'd like it to be.
You don't want to have 4 by 8 or 9 by any means. You definitely want to get that number down as an aging defenseman, but I don't know.
You hit the nail on the head in something that I didn't grasp onto in your initial discussion of this, and the fact that it would be a signal that Carolina would be operating as a franchise just differently. It's more star power forward. I think we have often prognosticated that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. But I will say, when it comes to this particular situation, I want them to be more, in general, absent of this situation, I want them to be more star power forward. You win cups with guys that are just superstars. In this particular circumstance, it doesn't feel like a Canes move to me. He's older, signed for too long. He's playing, he plays a position that's not a position of need necessarily. Do you even want to reunite him and Brent Burns?
Well, that's a question for Brent Burns.
Right.
I'm sure the organization has
asked.
If he had any qualms about it, I don't think it would have been something they ever seriously went on anyway. So I don't think the Brent Burns bridge that people have created, I don't think there was really drama between them.
I had never heard that really.
I think it was more of an ice time, maybe power play deployment at the most. And this is just speculating off really nothing, to be quite honest with you. So
yeah, I've never heard that seriously substantiated. But to me, this one just doesn't make a ton of sense. I'm thrilled that they are always, quote, in on every deal and are super aggressive in talent acquisition. I just can't come up with a palatable trade package that makes it work in my mind for either side. And really, it's a little bit redundant. As good of a player as he would be and as a big of a name, I probably misspoke. He wouldn't be the biggest name to ever play for the franchise. He might be defensively, but it just, now's not the time.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the thing for me that's really important about this whole scenario is that the Sharks organization is, from what I understand, told him they will trade him. And at the end of the day, when that happens and there's a short list of teams that are, number one, interested and have the assets to get him, and then it comes down to what's his preference, like that price really starts to drive down. And what I'm really curious about is Greer willing to go back on his word and not trade him? Because at the end of the day,
that's a slippery slope.
If you're talking, I think I've heard Pittsburgh, Seattle, Carolina. There was a while where, like you mentioned, Carolina and Pittsburgh were the front runners. But at the end of the day, all of these guys understand the pinch you're in, and nobody's gonna hit a ball out of the park for you just to.
Who's gonna flinch first?
Exactly.
Yeah, we're not gonna up our deal because we know your back's against the wall. They're not. San Jose is not negotiating from a position of strength here, and the other teams recognize that.
Yeah, I mean, look at the return on Meyer. Like we talked about it when it happened. I thought the return on Meyer was not good, to be frank with you, and that's
Is Greer going to be gun shy negotiating against Waddell again because he got heisted last summer? Like, those things exist.
I don't know. It's the Carlson thing is weird for me. I kind of lean to your side where it's like, number one, I don't really think it's Kane's deal. Number two, like I just don't see it happening ultimately, just due to all the moving parts with it. And the Canes aren't going to be looking, as every day that we get closer to the season, the Canes aren't going to be looking to add a Carlson. They're going to want to have, if you're bringing in a player of that caliber, they're going to want him in as soon as possible. We've seen how long it takes a lot of defensemen to learn the system and really start to blossom in it. They're not going to be interested in running the risk that doesn't go well. So I just, and
you're gonna have 5 right shot defensemen, like what?
I mean, you have to move
one out or two,
a minimum of one, and you could potentially be moving out Chatfield as well. I mean, so all that to say that there is a lot up in the air. It's like eerily quiet, but the Canes news, if it drops, it's just going to hit us out of the blue one day.
And that's why it also doesn't feel like this will be it. I would love to check the phone and be bombarded with news of a huge forward trade. That's what I've been hoping for the past number of years. As we kind of start to wrap up, just want to touch on got something right. Michael Bunting was signed by your Carolina Hurricanes. I think it's a really nice ad, palatable contract. We already touched on Lemieux. And then the internal guys that were kept, I love that they were able to keep Jesper Fast. I think it was a good deal for both sides.
He definitely left money.
He did, of course.
I think he did the organization a solid in the sense that, there was probably up to I would say $600K more out on the market. I think he was pushing.
I think that first number could have been 3. Yeah,
I think he could have been in the low 3s, maybe with even a year more to like maybe topping out at 3 years of term. But there was definitely more money out there in the market. He loves Carolina. His family loves Carolina. Like it's been a good place for him. He loves the staff, and he's at that point in his career where he wants to stay here. And as Canes fans, we haven't had a whole lot of that in our lifetime, and you're really starting to see the effects of the culture shift. That Waddell's
it's almost
mentioned
become an
it.
expectation the guys resign now.
Yeah,
they want to be here.
Yeah, and taking less money to do it in a lot of scenarios, and that's just a sign to the work that this organization has done. And we've been critical on them in a lot of facets for sure. We've been very critical of a lot of the things Dundon has done, and we'll never forgive him for moving on from John Forsland. But that's, at the end of the day, he owns the team, and that's his prerogative. But when you look at the quality on ice product and the quality for the players, they've done really great things in that regard, and you have to tip your cap to that for sure.
100%. And, we didn't allocate a ton of time to Jesper, but I don't want it to go unsaid how low-key of a fantastic signing and key kind of tertiary cog he's become for this team and organization. So really happy he's staying in town. Let's kind of there's 2 more names, one quick discussion, and then one final thought about our Lord and Savior as we exit. Both Freddie Anderson and Antti Ranta are back. Team-friendly deals. Anderson 2 times 3.4, Ranta 1 year at 1.5. The discussion is not so much about the players because we know what they're going to bring, and they've been here a number of years. My question for you is, do we see a 3-goalie rotation? Is Kochetkov going to be in the NHL or back in the A? And how's this play out? Because I'm a little uneasy to have the 3 goalie set up.
So, I think it's a guarantee that Kochetkov plays in the NHL, and not probably due to running 3 goalies, but out of necessity. You have 2 goalies that are injury prone that are your 1 and 2 most likely. So, and I think at the end of the day, it's going to create healthy competition. If Kochetkov wants to take that next step, he's going to have to beat out one of the 2, and they're both seasoned veterans that come to work every day. You look at a guy like Ranta, and he's extremely professional, and Anderson is, a very talented goalie, and you're going to have to beat those guys out. Like I've made the reference to you, and I know Kochetkov is no Vasilevsky, but Vasilevsky had to push Ben Bishop out of goal in Tampa Bay. And he did it and earned the number 1. If Kochetkov wants to be that guy, he's going to have to do it. He had a really great string of games last year, and he's got to figure out how to put it all together on a consistent basis and make sure that he continues to improve. We're going to see all 3 goalies play in the NHL next year. As far as AHL deployment for Kochetkov, it's all weird to me because when you think about loaning him to an AHL team, and these teams have NHL affiliates,
but that's a concern.
Prospect goalies, and you have to worry about
Carolina doesn't have Chicago anymore,
and you have to worry about playing time, coaching, et cetera, et cetera. It's really not a great situation to be in. Luckily, there aren't a ton of guys that I think are going to be drastically impacted by it based on where their career is at. But Kochetkov could be a guy where it could be a mismanagement of an asset if you're popping him in AHL loans and not really getting him NHL time. I think we talked about you don't commit 4 years at $2 million to a guy that you don't see as your future either 1 or 2 goaltender. So it's something that the coaching staff's going to have to figure out, and I don't know. I don't know which way it's going to go.
I just hope it doesn't stunt his development because we've seen such high-end upside out of him. Sure. Consistency's kind of been the key. But that'll be something for everyone to monitor. Now, as we wind down and get out of here, we're the podcast, so we got to talk about this. It's Rod's heading to the final year of his deal. I don't think there's many rumors of an impasse, but Rod is drastically underpaid compared to league average, and especially the other best coaches in the league. You know, the top 5 or 10 guys. I think if he hit the open market, he could be looking at getting paid almost double what he's paid now.
Probably more. Yeah.
So how do you think this plays out? Rod's always said he doesn't want to coach forever, but he wants someone to cut. So what are your initial thoughts? Are we going to have to change our podcast name?
Well, I would certainly hope not. I don't know where he did the
Come on,
interview
Mike. The answer is
recently.
no. We're not going to change our podcast name no matter what.
Oh yeah, well that's fair.
Come on.
Yeah, until we get a cease and desist, we'll have to see. Like I was mentioning, I don't know what podcast or show or whatever he said it on, but he said it kind of on multiple occasions where he doesn't see himself anywhere else. He's not helping himself in the negotiating world by doing some of the things he does. But what's really important to him and some of the things he's outlined is that, number one, he gets to coach where he lives and where he played, and that means a lot to him. Number two, he has a lot of say internally for roster management and things along those lines, which not a lot of guys in his position have. And, you know, like the quality of life that comes with it and the happiness he gets has a value on it that's outside of money. With that being said, I think he's under $2 million a year right now. I think it's 1.8, somewhere around that range. And I think he would easily command 4+ on the open market. I'm thinking probably even closer to
the
5.
high-end guys are on the 5 side, yeah.
So he's certainly underpaid. He's going to need to be paid more. It's never going to be at the high end of the market just because of the internal relationship they have and those little details that Rod has mentioned that he feels he has that a lot of other people don't have.
No, I think those are all great points. And to me, you have heard Tom Dundon talk in reverence. To me, there's 3 people that come to mind. It's really 4, but 3 of them are players and guys that
Can I guess them?
You can try, yeah.
No, I can.
The 3
I
guys
know
that can't, he wants them to play their whole career.
Slavin, Aho, Svetch as the players.
Aho would be the recent addition to that group.
Yes, because it was originally Svetch.
Svetch was the one.
And then it was Slavin.
Yep.
And now Aho's joined the group, and then Rod. Those are his 4.
Those are his 4. And so we know Rod and Tom have a really good relationship. The negotiation wasn't necessarily smooth last time, but that was more so it came out that Rod was trying to get more for his assistants. Obviously, that ended up happening. I think just shows the character of Rod. But at a certain point, you become so grossly underpaid that it needs to be rectified. And I think they'll end up landing somewhere in the middle on, once again, a shorter-ish term deal. Rod doesn't want a 5-6 year contract. We're going to be looking in the 2 to 3 year range that I think will tie them to this core through their primes.
Yeah. I would think,
we got to monitor this one. This is, of all the things we've talked about today, the most critical to us. The owner believes it's the most critical. So
it's going to get done.
He understands Rod's the straw that stirs the drink here.
Yeah, and Dundon is a businessman at the end of the day, and he is a cold-blooded businessman. And, you know, it's going to happen, but he's not going to do it without trying to shave off as much money as possible. And, I mean, that's just the reality. That's why he is a billionaire, and I'm not, because I don't have that mentality. And almost, I would say 99.99% of Canes fans aren't cut from the same cloth that he's cut from. And so it's harder for us.
99% of all humans are.
I would agree.
And I mean that positively. I mean, the guy's just built different. The way he views the world, he's willing to take advantage and lean everything in all the way. And he's contributed to a great product on the ice for this team. At the end of the day, as Canes fans, that's really what we care about. It's given the organization sustainability, and you're knocking on the door every year. What more could we ask for? 5 years ago, this would have been so far-fetched, but here we are, and it's our reality now, and we owe Tom Dundon that. But you are absolutely right. I believe this gets done because at the end of the day, Tom Dundon believes Rod Brindamore is the most important person in the building. And what does Tom Dundon care about? The on-ice product. He can be a cold person, a calculated business individual when it comes to things that are not about the on-ice product.
Yeah.
No one impacts him more than Rod. It'll get done.
Yeah. And, I mean, he's backed up what he's said. He's spent to the cap. He's done all the things he says he's going to do so far. I mean, without Tom Dundon, there is no outdoor hockey game in Raleigh. Like, he's had a positive impact. He's had his moments that have been unsavory. And at the end of the day, as long as you get a good mix, there's some owners out there where it's just all unsavory.
All bad. Hey,
so,
that's what we're here for. We talk about the good and the bad. We've been critical at times, but hey, the net outcome here has been wildly positive. And so I hope that perpetuates forward. It's just a bump in the road here, and that ultimately gets done in the next 12 months. I think it will. But a lot of good memories made in the Dundon era and a lot more to come.
Yeah, I would say so.
All right, you ready to get out of here?
I think so. We'll probably see you in like September.